This is a fictional story inspired by real science and archaeology. It's designed to help us visualize what ancient humans might have experienced in the face of environmental catastrophe like acid rain. You're out hunting when it starts. At first, it looks like any other downpour, dark clouds rolling in fast, wind howling through the treetops, leaves spinning in the air like frightened birds. You tug the animal hide tighter around your shoulders, narrowing your eyes at the sky. But something feels wrong. The wind smells different, sharp, bitter, and the rain, when it finally falls, doesn't cool your skin. It stings it. You don't know the word for acid, but you know pain. You flinch as the droplets hit your forearms, your neck, your face. It's as if the sky is spitting poison. Your tribe had always worshipped the rain. It meant rivers would swell, the forest would bloom, the hunt would be easier. But this is no blessing. You sprint through the trees, ducking under thick-leaved branches that offer little shelter. The animals are gone. Not just hiding gone. No rustling in the underbrush. No birds calling overhead. Even the insects have vanished. The world is silent, except for the hiss of rain eating into the dirt like hot coals. By the time you reach the cave, your skin is dotted with red blotches. They blister quickly. Others have arrived before you, some dragging, screaming children, others collapsing just inside the entrance. The old woman, your tribe's fire, Teller sits near the flames, watching the sky from the mouth of the cave. Her eyes are wide. She's mumbling something over and over. The sky is angry. We have broken something. The sky is angry. It would be easy to dismiss this scene as fiction, just another dramatic imagining of prehistoric life. But science paints a much darker possibility. Tens of thousands of years ago, our planet was no stranger to catastrophe. Volcanic eruptions, cosmic impacts, and sudden climate shifts didn't just change the weather, they rewrote the rules of survival. And one of the most terrifying side effects? Natural acid rain. Modern acid rain is often associated with pollution from burning fossil fuels, smog, and industrial waste. But long before factories, Earth created its own version. Vulcanu especially, supervolcano scan, pump millions of tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. That gas mixes with water vapor, forming sulfuric acid. When it falls back to Earth, it doesn't just drench the land, it corrodes it. The most infamous example, the eruption of Lake Toba. Around 74,000 years ago, this supervolcano in present-day Indonesia exploded with a force 5,000 times greater than Mount St. Helens. Ash blanketed the sky. Temperatures plummeted. Crops failed. But what rarely gets discussed is what came afterward: months of acidic rainfall, falling on an already fragile Earth. If you were a human alive then, you wouldn't know the word Toba. You wouldn't understand the chemistry of sulfur dioxide or the concept of a climate event. But you'd know the rain hurt. You'd know the rivers turned sour. The plants wilted, the animals changed their patterns. You'd know something was very, very wrong. Back in the cave, the children cry out. One boy tries to drink from a puddle, forming just beyond the entrance, and he screams in pain as the water hits his cracked lips. The elders rush to him, pulling him back, brushing his face with ash and crushed bark to soothe the burning. But no one knows what's happening. Not really. Some say the rain is cursed. Others think it's the breath of a god, punishing them for hunting too deep in the forest. A hunter claims he saw lightning strike the mountain and split it open, and that black smoke rose from the earth for days. They all argue. But deep in your gut, a colder thought takes root. What if this never stops? The rains continue for days. The forest grows quiet and slick. Plants that once fed you now rot with blackened spots. Deer and boar lie dead near streams. their eyes wide and glassy, their stomachs bloated. The stream itself smells like the fire pit after rain, a bitter, metallic tang that coats your throat even as you try not to swallow. You've survived before droughts, floods, even a predator stalking the camp for weeks. But this is different. It's invisible. It comes from the sky, and it's everywhere. Archaeologists call this kind of suffering an invisible extinction pressure. Something that doesn't wipe out humanity overnight, but forces a slow, brutal thinning of the population. Fewer plants grow. Animals migrate to new terrain. Water becomes toxic. Entire tribes vanish, and the survivors don't even know what killed them. There's evidence that this happened not once, but multiple times. In layers of ancient sediment in South Africa, researchers have found pollen grains that suddenly stop appearing, a sign that certain plants went extinct in a single season. Nearby, there's an increase in charred soil and volcanic ash, suggesting a rapid climate shift, possibly tied to acid rain or air pollution from a massive eruption. In Europe, stone tools vanished from the record for hundreds of years in certain valleys, possibly because the land became too harsh to inhabit. Even human skulls from the time show increased signs of stress. Bone thinning, nutritional deficiencies, trauma. It wasn't just that the world got colder, it got meaner. And somewhere, among all this pain, small tribes like yours had to figure out how to survive. The answer wasn't strength. It wasn't speed. It was adaptation. Some groups learned to filter water through crushed charcoal. Others discovered that crushed shells or limestone could neutralize some of the burning in the streams. Stories passed from cave to cave of hiding in high places when the rain came, or smearing fat and ash on the skin to keep the burning away. None of it was perfect, but it was enough. The question is, would you have been one of the ones who figured it out? Or would you be the skeleton archaeologists would find, curled up near the back of the cave, mouth open, rain scars still etched into your bones? This is the forgotten story of prehistoric survival. Not just brute force or clever tools, but the desperate, brilliant improvisation of humans facing a world that tried to kill them in 100 new ways. The rain that fell wasn't just water, it was a test. One that only some would pass, because even now, in the modern world, the Earth hasn't forgotten how to burn us. If stories like this fascinate you, the hidden battles our ancestors fought just to see another sunrise, consider subscribing. We've only just begun this descent into Earth's most dangerous memory. The old man says the rain is a punishment. He sits hunched by the fire, his voice hoarse from smoke and age, muttering stories that no one has heard before. About the time the stars fell and the rivers boiled. About birds that fell from the sky without wounds. About trees that wept black sap and fish that bled from their mouths. You'd always dismissed his tales, just the ramblings of a half-blind elder whose days of hunting were long behind him. But now they sound familiar. Now they sound like today. Outside, the forest steams. Rain hisses off the stone ledges above the cave like oil in a fire. Some of the tribe have taken to piling rocks near the entrance, trying to seal out the poison. Others crush flowers and moss into paste, painting their faces and arms with strange symbols, whispering for protection. You watch as your sister lays still beside the fire, eyes half closed, breathing shallow. She was caught in the rain too long. Her lips are cracked. Her skin burns just from the air. No one knows what to do. But you start to notice something. When the smoke from the fire grows thick, the sting in your throat fades. When you press your wet skin against the cool ash that coats the cave floor, the burn eases. When you drink from the trickle of water that runs through the deepest part of the cave filtered through rock, it doesn't hurt. You don't have science. You don't have language for pH levels or sulfuric compounds, but you do have observation, and that's where survival begins. It's easy to think of early humans as superstitious, primitive, reactive. But time and again, archaeology proves otherwise. Long before we had instruments to measure the acidity of rain, humans were noticing patterns, noticing what burned and what healed, noticing which rivers killed fish after a storm, noticing which caves gave safe water even after the skies turned dark. In Ethiopia's Middle Stone Age sites, scientists found charcoal-rich sediment layers interspersed with buried shell fragments and even crushed mineral deposits like limestone and calcite, which we now know can neutralize acid. These weren't random. They appeared only after major eruptions or heavy weather shifts. The implication? Early humans were experimenting, reacting, adapting. One remarkable example comes from the Clazies River caves in South Africa. After a volcanic event altered the local environment, there's clear evidence that tribes began moving deeper into caves, abandoning open-air shelters altogether. Tool debris and fire pits shift locations, ash layers thicken, and food remains begin showing a reliance on deep-shell mollusks and root vegetables, things found below ground, where the rain couldn't reach. This wasn't coincidence. It was intelligence sero, empirical survival intelligence. In your cave, the tribe holds its first council. 3 families argue over what to do. One man wants to flee head into the mountains and search for a new forest. Another insists they must send scouts to find the skybreak, the place where the rain begins. The old woman, still watching the storm from the entrance, says you must stay, that moving now is suicide. You speak quietly, uncertain about the things you've noticed, about the cave water, about the ash, about how your sister only began to breathe easier when the smoke thickened. At first, no one listens. Then, one of the elders picks up a clump of ash and rubs it on the sores on his arm. He waits. Minutes pass. He nods. Cool, he says. Soft. The next day, others try it. They begin spreading ash around the cave entrance, like a barrier, mixing it with moss and bark, wrapping wounds in it, smearing it on the walls like a warning. Here, the sky cannot hurt you. Modern researchers call this proto-medicine. Ash, especially wood, ash contains alkaline minerals that can counteract acidity. It also has mild antiseptic properties and absorbs moisture. In low concentrations, it calms burns. And early humans discovered this not in a lab but through necessity, through pain, and through thousands of tiny experiments over generations. In layers dating back over 100,000 years, we find ash-lined burials, ash-packed hearths, and ash-painted shelter walls. Some researchers once assumed it was just waste, but now, many believe it was deliberate. A survival tactic. A technology. One developed in the face of an invisible enemy. And if the enemy was acid rain, that tactic might have saved lives. But the adaptations didn't stop there. As the storms continued, your tribe changed their patterns. They stopped hunting by day, when the skies were brightest and most unstable. They began tracking animals that only moved at dusk. They planted smoke pits near the cave, filling the air with thick, bitter fog that masked scent, and maybe they hoped, repelled the sky's poison. They gathered leaves from the waxy trees, ones whose water never tasted sharp. They found vines that dripped clean liquid from their roots even after the worst storms. They marked these plants with carved stones so the children would remember. And perhaps most telling of all, they began to tell stories. In Indonesia, ancient cave art near Toba's eruption zone shows what some believe to be distorted depictions of falling ash, blackened sunbursts, and crouched figures shielding their heads. It's impossible to prove intent, but the timing matches the event. And the symbols are unlike anything found before or after in that region. In Central Africa, petroglyphs near rain-scarred rock shelters depict what looks like burning sky serpents, symbols of divine punishment from above. Were these myths born from acid rain? We may never know for sure, but they do show us something powerful. Trauma creates memory, and memory creates myth. Your ancestors may not have understood acid, but they knew it came from above. They may not have known chemistry, but they knew to fear the clouds that glowed yellow, and somewhere along the way, they encoded that fear into stories so the next generation would remember not just the pain, but the solutions. And yet, not every tribe survived. In other valleys, the rain fell harder, the ash didn't arrive in time, or the lessons weren't passed on. And the evidence of those failures still rests in the soil tools abandoned mid-carve, footprints that lead nowhere, fire pits filled with unburnt wood. In those places, the rain won. But here, in your cave, someone is beginning to understand, beginning to piece it together, beginning to teach the others how to fight an enemy they cannot see. If this kind of storytelling is lighting up your imagination, if you're fascinated by how humans endured the worst nature had to offer with nothing but instinct, courage, and trial and error, then now's the time to subscribe. These ancient disasters still hold lessons for us today, and we've only scratched the surface. Days pass, then weeks. The sky never returns to normal. Sometimes, the rain stops, but the clouds still hang heavy and yellow. Sometimes, the air is dry, but your throat still burns when you breathe it. Even firewood now smells wrong when it burns, and the bark that once boiled into soothing tea now leaves a bitter taste that numbs your tongue. You've learned to avoid the puddles. You've learned not to trust the rivers. You've learned to check the wind before stepping outside. And most importantly, you've learned something no one ever dared to say aloud before. The world itself can turn against you. That truth settles into the bones of your tribe like cold. You see it in how the children stop asking to go outside. How the warriors whisper more and more often before the hunt. How the old stories around the fire have started to change. Once, the stars were guides. Now, they're warnings. Once, the mountains were strong. Now, they are feared. Once, the rain meant life. Now, it means death. But adaptation is not just action, it's meaning-making. And meaning is how humans survive what they can't understand. Across the world, early humans were facing something they couldn't explain in words, but they could see the results. And it left marks not just on their bodies, but on their minds and cultures. Archaeologists have discovered strange and sudden shifts in cave art after major volcanic events. In France's Chauvet Cave, some of the oldest paintings on Earth, over 30,000 years old, suddenly depict panicked herds, swirling skies, and smoke cloud patterns where earlier art showed calm, noble animals. In Central Europe, certain burial sites suddenly appear deeper underground, placed beneath layers of stone, almost as if the people feared the sky itself would disturb their dead. And in caves across Africa, some groups begin painting not animals or hunts but hands, hundreds of them. Negative space, blown through pigment, left behind like silent prayers. Why? Some believe these were marks of identity. Others think they were signs of belonging. But there's another theory. They were records of survival. We were here. We endured. We touched this place, and the sky did not take us. Back in your tribe, the hunters return empty more often than not. The animals have moved. No one knows where. The forest seems to grow slower now. Trees shed their leaves earlier. Some bark begins to curl and rot before your eyes. And your sister once healing gauze stopped improving. She sleeps more now, talks less. When she does speak, her words come slowly, like smoke rising from a dying fire. You begin to wonder if she was simply outside too long, or if the world has planted something inside her that will never leave. And yet, not all is lost. There are new signs too. One boy, barely old enough to speak in full sentences, seems to have discovered something remarkable. While playing alone near the cave wall, he began rubbing soot and water together, forming a thin black paste. He smeared it on his arms mock war paint. But after several hours outside, he came back untouched. No burns, no red marks, just laughter. At first, no one believes him. So, you try it. Then, 2 others. And when it works, really works, something changes in the cave. For the first time in weeks, people smile. You're not helpless anymore. You have a shield. Science backs this up. Even basic soot and wood ash, when mixed with water or fat, can create a mild alkaline film. This doesn't neutralize acid completely, but it provides a physical barrier between skin and environmental damage. It's the same principle used in some modern creams or soaps for chemical burns coating. The skin in something that slows or deflects the corrosive agent long enough for the body to react. There's even archaeological speculation that early body painting wasn't always symbolistic, may have been medicinal or protective. Some ancient pigments included ground, limestone, clay, or even chalky volcanic ash materials we now know are alkaline. Protective not just from the sun, but maybe even from acid rain or toxic dust in post-eruption environments. These people weren't just decorating themselves, they were building armor. More and more now, your people turn inward, not just into the cave but into themselves. There is less shouting, less arguing. There's no room for division now. Not when every trip outside carries the risk of coming back blistered, coughing, or poisoned. New roles emerge. A young girl becomes the tribe's taster, carefully testing plants, bark, and water in tiny doses, cataloging which ones still sting. A pair of twins begin carving signs near safe plant sown line for drink, 2 for burns, a spiral for watch the wind. The fire teller, once thought mad, now speaks in riddles that make just enough sense to be useful. People begin to listen to her, and you start mapping. You draw with sticks in the ash, carving patterns of where the streams still run clear, where the thick trees seem to shelter the ground, where the animals briefly return. You memorize these routes. You test them. You pass them on. Survival becomes your ritual. And for the first time, it begins to feel possible. Elsewhere in the prehistoric world, these survival behaviors hardened into something bigger. Culture. Disasters like volcanic winters or acid rain didn't just challenge the human body, they forced the creation of rules, roles, and rituals, what we now call proto-society. In the aftermath of massive eruptions like Toba, entire communities became more structured, more symbolic, more collaborative. We see evidence in how burials became more complex, how tools became more standardized, and how settlement patterns shifted to safer, more defensible terrain. It wasn't just about finding food anymore. It was about finding order in a world that had turned violent and strange. One morning, your sister wakes up with clear eyes. The ash around her bed was thick. You'd piled it there nightly. She drinks the cave water without gagging. She smiles at you, a real smile, and says just 2 words. Not today. And that's enough. That day, the sun almost breaks through. Almost. If you're still with us, you're part of something rare. Someone willing to peer into the forgotten terrors our species faced before history had a name. The storms are just beginning, but so is the knowledge. Subscribe now to be part of this journey. There's a lot more sky to fall. You're learning to wait. Once, hunting was instinct. If you saw movement in the trees, you moved. If you heard hoofbeats near the stream, you chased. But now, everything requires patience. You wait for the sky to clear not of clouds, but of color. You've learned to recognize the sickly yellow haze that signals danger. The clouds no longer bring shade, they carry omen. You wait for water to stop hissing when it hits the rocks. You don't drink from puddles anymore, and you no longer trust the surface of a stream just because it runs clear. Now you test. Now you filter. That too was discovered by mistake. A child curious, reckless drank from a puddle that had passed through a pile of burned branches and charcoal. The water looked filthy, but he didn't get sick, didn't burn. Days passed. He remained fine. It wasn't luck. It was the start of something. Modern humans filter water with advanced systems membranes, chemicals, UV light. But early humans had charcoal. And charcoal is powerful. It binds to toxins, it absorbs impurities, and it neutralizes certain acidic elements in water. Today, we still use activated charcoal in medicine to treat poisoning. It's even used in emergency filters for acid-contaminated water supplies in crisis zones. Now, imagine discovering that, by accident, 70,000 years ago, at archaeological sites near ancient volcanic zones in Asia and Africa, there's evidence of charcoal-lined pits near water collection areas. These aren't random fire pits. They appear layered, carefully placed, and often associated with smooth, stones-possible primitive tools for straining or channeling water through charcoal before it reaches a container or drinking pool. It's a filtration system, one born not from theory, but survival. And now, your tribe has one too. You build them near the entrance, not deep in the cave, where clean runoff from the rock still provides safe moisture, but near the outer paths, where others might wander. It becomes a ritual. Someone stirs the ash. Someone arranges fresh wood for the next burn. Someone tastes. Someone waits. You're beginning to build systems, routines, protocols, culture. And maybe that's how real civilization always starts, not with language or tools, but with repetition. Safety built into memory. But not everyone believes in systems. Some believe in signs. The fire teller has taken to marking the walls now. Every day, she adds something new: a scratch, a symbol, a handprint dipped in ash. She says the cave speaks to her, that it shows which children will be spared, that it dreams while the rain falls. You don't know whether to believe her. But then, one morning, she draws a circle around your sister's bed. That night, the rain returns sand for the first time. The cave leaks. The cracks in the ceiling drip poison. You wake in panic. Everyone scrambles to move the fire, to shift bedding, to collect tools. But your sister? She was in the circle, and somehow, not a single drop touches her. You stare at the mark on the wall for a long time after that. Prehistoric humans weren't just survivors. They were meaning makers. And in times of fear and disaster, meaning becomes medicine. Belief becomes action. And action sometimes leads, whether by chance or by pattern, to survival. Across prehistoric settlements, anthropologists find charcoal symbols, handprints, and repeated motifs near shelter walls, especially after known climate events. Some of these seem decorative. Others are eerily systematic, like the spiral symbols found in volcanic regions of southern Italy, etched just after a major eruption. Were they prayers, maps, warnings, maybe all of them? Because in a world ruled by mystery, even imagination was a survival tool. You start noticing other patterns too. The animals are returning. Not all, and not the same ones. The deer seem thinner, their coats patchier. Some arrive in herds but collapse near the poisoned streams. Others seem skittish, their eyes wider, their movements faster. You realize they've changed too, they've had to. And the birds fly lower now. You hear fewer calls, but the ones you hear echo longer in the stillness. You begin to understand which calls mean safe, Skyand, which ones mean go back inside. You've begun to interpret nature itself like scripture, and from that interpretation, the beginnings of law emerge. In many early societies, environmental patterns became spiritual commandments. Don't drink from the Black River. Don't walk when the sky glows yellow. Don't sleep under the lone tree. They sound like myths. But in acid-affected zones, many of these taboos align with survival logic. In the Andes, for example, indigenous people developed complex spiritual practices around sulfur springs and volcanic sites places we now know release acid gases. Their myths were built around avoiding exposure. In ancient Mesopotamia, gods of rain and wind were both revered and feared, and sacrifices were often made before storms, not after, as if to beg the weather not to turn hostile. Perhaps those fears weren't primitive. Perhaps they were memories of when the sky really did attack. One evening, you go to the edge of the cave alone. The rain hasn't fallen for 2 days, but the clouds still look heavy, like bruises forming across the sky. You take a handful of ash and smear it on your chest. You carry a piece of coal in your hand, and you walk only a few steps. Just far enough to reach the rock where your father used to stand before the hunt. You place the coal there, a mark, a memory. When you return, your hands are steady. Your sister is smiling. The fire burns low, and behind you the sky does not follow. We often think of ancient humans as reacting, but what we see again and again is that they responded with systems, with memory, with ritual, with belief, with adaptation so sophisticated that it saved them long before science could explain why it worked. Acid rain didn't destroy them, it taught them. And every burned hand, every wrong step, every poisoned sip became a lesson passed down not through books, but through story, through symbols, through you. If you're still here, that means you're fascinated not just by how humans survived, but how they learned to survive. That's the story we're telling in every part of this series. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because the storms may be easing, but the real danger is about to begin. You hear them before you see them, footsteps echoing down the stone corridor fast. Frantic, a grunt, then a voice. They're coming. Your head lifts from your knees, the others turn. Some rise, startled, others grip their sharpened sticks, but it's not enemies. It's people, strangers. 3 of them covered in soot and ash, their feet wrapped in animal hide, their eyes wide with fatigue and fear. One carries a sack. Another holds a child on her back, wrapped in bark cloth and cradled with one trembling hand. The third, an older man, collapses just beyond the cave's mouth. You recognize none of them, and yet you all understand what they are. Refugees. For the first time since the sky turned, your tribe is not alone. The woman speaks of her home 2 valleys east, near the river bend with black stones. She says the rains came harder there, that the river rose, steaming, that animals died by the dozens, that her tribe scattered. Some fled toward the mountains, others deeper into the trees. They found bodies along the way, small ones, burned, mouths open. They didn't stop walking. Disaster forces movement, and movement forces contact. There's evidence that during massive environmental upheavals like volcanic winters or prolonged acid rain, event human groups migrated in unusual ways. Not just to follow game, but to escape, to warn, to seek others. One study of obsidian tools across East Africa shows that after a major climate event, artifacts from distant regions suddenly appear together, suggesting that communication and trade routes expanded, likely in desperation. This was one of the first tests of whether humans would compete or cooperate. and in many places they chose the latter. The strangers are given food, water, space. Some in your tribe don't trust them. Resources are low, the rains still come and go, but others recognize the value in something even scarcer than meat or firewood: information. They speak of ways their people survived. They show how they tied wet hides over their cave mouths to stop the drip, how they filtered water through sand before ash, how one elder used boiled bark from a thick-trunked tree to soothe burning eyes. It worked, they say. At least once. It may work again. One night, as the fire burns low, you sit beside the oldest visitor. He says they used to mark paths with sign-stacked stones or knotted grass. Warnings, he calls them. Messages for those who followed. You ask what kind of message could stop a storm. He looks at you and says, not to stop it, just to know where not to die. The first warning systems weren't bells or flags. They were symbols, arrangements of the land. In areas near ancient volcanic fields, archaeologists have found cairns, scratched stones, and even twisted branches arranged in consistent patterns not far from lava flows or ash deposits. They weren't grave markers. They weren't hunting traps. Some believe they were early hazard markers. And in regions like Papua New Guinea, where acid rain still occasionally occurs due to volcanic gas releases, indigenous communities have oral traditions and visual markers along trails pointing out bad streams, danger trees, and poison pools with symbolic notches or carved shapes in bark. These weren't random. They were messages left behind by survivors for the next to come. You decide your tribe needs a message too. You gather smooth stones from the cave floor, smear them in charcoal, and carry them to the path's edge. You stack them in a triangular to the ground, but sharp. One stone is carved with a line, the second, a spiral, the third, empty. You don't know if anyone will understand it, but you leave it anyway. It feels right. And when the woman with the child sees it later, she nods. She doesn't ask what it means. She just adds another stone flat, white, shaped like a tooth hand, walks away. Now the cave feels fuller, not just in bodies, but in memory, in knowledge. Your fire teller begins combining the stories. She paints new symbols. She adds the tooth shape to her drawings, and she tells children a new version of the old myth. The sky grows sick, but we can teach it to forgive us. Is it a lie? Maybe, but it helps the children sleep. Cultural convergence is one of the least visible, most powerful results of shared disaster. When humans are forced together by fear, they don't just trade resources, they exchange ideas. Rituals become hybrid, stories merge, beliefs shift and fuse. Some anthropologists believe that the earliest versions of widespread oral traditions, like great floods, vengeful skies, and fallen stars, originated in precisely this way. As groups came together after atmospheric or geologic catastrophe and tried to explain what had happened to their world, and through shared story came shared identity. A week after the visitors arrive, the sky's clear, blue, real blue. You stare at it for hours. A few brave souls step outside. You go with them. You follow the stone path to the water collection pit. The air smells like wet grass. Your hands don't sting. The water is still dark but not bubbling. You lower your face to it. You see your reflection. Not burned, not twisted, just you. But something shifts inside you as you stare. It's not relief, it's caution. Because you've learned that the world can lie. That blue skies mean nothing if the wind changes. That survival is never finished, it only buys time. And now, your job is to give that time to others. With messages, with systems, with memory. The storms may be fading, but the lessons are just beginning. And if you want to follow how early humans turned memory into technology and technology into civilization, subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens when the next threat doesn't fall from the sky, but rises from beneath the earth. The storms ease, but the silence is worse. No one says it, but everyone feels it. You wake up expecting the hiss of rain. You flinch when a cloud passes over the cave mouth. You listen for the birds, not because you want their song, but because silence means the sky is angry again. It hasn't rained in 5 days. The forest is drier. The animals are returning. Even the streams, though, still suspicious, run clearer, but no one celebrates. No one trusts it. You've lived too long waiting for the sky to strike. Now, no one knows what to do after. In modern psychology, this is called anticipatory trauma, kind of conditioned fear that stays with survivors even after the threat is gone. And it's not just individual. Communities hold trauma too. After disasters, there's often a period of disorientation. People forget how to behave normally. They become cautious, quiet, rigid. Traditions form not out of celebration but out of fear. And in the ancient world, those traditions hardened into belief systems. In your tribe, a new figure is rising. Not the chief, not the strongest hunter, not even the fire teller. It's the one who tends the ash. They call her Ash Keeper. She's the one who layers the cave floor each morning with fresh charcoal from last night's fire. The one who smears soot along the entry stones. The one who stores burned wood in sealed clay bowls and says which should be used for water, which for wounds, and which never again. You've watched her. She doesn't speak much, but people listen when she does. Once, she was just another gatherer. Now, when a child is burned, they call her. When a stranger enters, they ask her to bless them. And when the wind shifts, everyone looks to her. Hands are they painting ash or resting? What started as survival is becoming sacred. This isn't fiction. Across early civilizations, the custodians of ritual behavior, those who preserved knowledge about fire, earth, water, or the sky, often became proto-priesthoods. They weren't necessarily the wisest, but they were the most consistent. The ones who remembered what had worked before, who kept the dangerous knowledge organized, who passed down ritual not just as memory, but as command. And the ash-burned wood, volcanic soot, char was sacred in many ancient societies. In Vedic traditions, bhasma, sacred ash, was placed on the body to protect against evil. In early Mesopotamian rituals, ash was used in purification ceremonies to cleanse disease or misfortune. And in Central Africa, some indigenous communities still use wood ash paste as a skin protectant and signal of spiritual transition, especially after disasters. So maybe it started here. Maybe in a cave like yours, someone started layering ash and someone else saw it as divine. You follow the ash keeper one morning. She walks outside, even though the air is damp. She tests it with a leaf, waits. Then she crouches beside the trickle that runs down the rock face one of your tribe's few remaining clean sources. But today, something's different. She dips her hand in, waits. She doesn't flinch, but she frowns. Later, she tells the fire teller to burn only dry wood tonight, to watch the smoke, to stop boiling the root tea everyone's been drinking for weeks. You don't ask why. But you notice others obey her too. That night, a boy vomits near the cave entrance. Another follows. The next morning, the ash keeper announces, "The stream has changed." No one argues. You begin to see the world as layers, not just rock, soil, water, but knowledge, risk, meaning the stream, once sacred, is now taboo. The inner wall of the cave, once just stone, is now a canvas of protective symbols. Even time feels layered. There's before the rain, during the rain, and now after a tense, uneasy peace that feels like it could shatter with a single yellow cloud. In archaeological layers, you can see trauma, soil rich in ash, bone fragments of the malnourished, sudden shifts in diet like charred tree bark or roots never eaten before, entire settlements rebuilt on higher ground with smaller, tighter entry points, even burials changeless, ornamental, more hurried, more symbolic. At one South African site, 3 skeletons were buried facing inward, their arms crossed over their faces, surrounded by charcoal and ochre. One theory? Ritual burial after toxic exposure, possibly acid rain or volcanic ashfall. Not just to mourn the dead, but to seal the event, to close the door on what had happened, to keep it from coming back. Your tribe starts naming seasons, but not in the old way. Not spring, summer, flood. Now it's ash season, skywatch, sleep of beasts, return of breath. Each name born from a different phase of the storm. Each name tied to memory. And now, children grow up hearing them not just as names, but as rules. They know not to touch water during skywatch. They know to rub their skin with smoke fat during ash season. They know not to laugh too loudly at night the sky might hear. You wonder if they'll remember what started it all, or if one day it will just become law. One evening, as stars blink overhead, you sit with your sister. She's stronger now, but the skin on her arms still bears faint, scar-stiny white traces of the rain that once burned through her. She touches one of the marks and asks, "Do you think it'll come back?" You don't answer. Instead, you hand her a chunk of charcoal, and together you draw a line on the cave wall. These weren't just drawings. They were memory anchors, rituals of control, in a world that had none. And perhaps beneath the fear, beneath the ash, this was how early humans conquered the unknown. Not by defeating it, but by turning it into story, into symbols, into something they could carry forward. Even if they didn't understand the science, they understood the pattern. And that's what you're doing right now, uncovering the forgotten patterns of how we made it through the worst the Earth had to offer. Subscribe if you haven't already. The storms may be silent now, but what's growing beneath the ground may be far worse. It rains again, but this time, no one panics. The warning signs were clear. Birds vanished the day before, the clouds turned pale, and a strange bitterness crept into the wind. The Ashkeeper had already instructed the tribe to burn certain woods and hang dampened moss over the cave's higher vents. The fires were moved inward, the food covered, the children tucked deeper inside. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows. You're not just surviving anymore. You're preparing. Disaster isn't what breaks civilization, it's what often builds it. When archaeologists look at early shelters in disaster-prone regions, volcanic zones, floodplains, and tectonic fault lines, they notice something fascinating. Caves and settlements show modifications made only after traumatic events. Entrances are narrowed, ceilings reinforced, fire pits shifted away from airflows, sleeping platforms elevated on mounds of ash or stone. In sites like Blombos Cave in South Africa, there's evidence of purposeful reconstruction following major climate shift shelters reshaped not just for comfort, but for resistance. Human beings weren't just huddling, they were engineering. You don't remember who suggested it first. Maybe it was the Ashkeeper. Maybe the fire teller. Maybe the mother who lost her son to a puddle she couldn't see. But now, everyone is building. Stones are stacked not just around the fire, but along the floor to direct water away from bedding areas. Moss is woven into mats to line the ceiling cracks. Ash is packed between rock slabs like mortar, keeping out leaks and blocking wind. You're turning the cave into something it's never been before. A fortress. You take part too. You carve grooves into the cave floor, directing runoff toward the lower chambers. You seal old entry tunnels with hardened clay and thorn branches. You fashion a sloped stone shelf, simple, crude, but it works. The water that used to puddle near the sleeping area now flows safely down and away. One child names it the Sky Gutter. Everyone laughs. It's the first time you've heard laughter in weeks. In modern terms, you've just invented primitive drainage system sand, the earliest forms of environmental engineering. We often associate infrastructure with settled agriculture, but even in the Middle Paleolithic, humans began modifying their shelters in response to atmospheric threats. In Ohalothian, Upper Paleolithic site in Israel, researchers found stone-lined floor depressions and semi-waterproof surfaces near sleeping areas dated to over 23,000 years ago. These weren't accidents. They were intentional adaptations, likely in response to repeated flooding, heavy rains, or acidic downpours from nearby eruptions. What we now call infrastructure began as desperation. Outside, the rain hisses on the stone above, but this time, it doesn't seep in. The ceiling mats hold. The fire smoke bends gently along the chamber wall, guided by the way the vents have been shaped. The youngest children, newborns who've never known a safe sky sleep undisturbed. You sit near the edge, watching the drops fall and roll away. It's working. You're not just hiding from the storm anymore. You're outsmarting it. With physical changes come mental ones. The cave is quieter now. Yes, but less tense. There's rhythm to the routine. Structure. Tasks rotate by cycle. Ash collector, water tester, moss gatherer, food taster. New names for old roles. And the cave itself is treated differently. Where once it was simply shelter, now it's system. There's a zone for sleeping, one for fire, one for food. Boundaries marked by lines of rock or smears of soot. Children learn not to cross the fire line barefoot, not to touch the ash bowls without permission, not to breathe too deeply in the upper chamber unless the ash keeper says the air is safe. Rules are becoming law, and law, even without words, is the foundation of society. Elsewhere in the ancient world, we see similar transitions. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, 65,000 years ago, Neanderthals buried their dead with carefully placed stones, flowers, and even protective layers of ash. One theory, they had learned to treat their space as sacred, as engineered. At Cavemen Cave in Israel, dated 400,000 years ago, hominins seem to have divided the cave into zones for different activities. One of the earliest examples of spatial organization based on function, not just convenience. It's not just about surviving the day, it's about building for the next one. Your sister joins the ash team. She volunteers. Her arms still bear scars, and her voice remains soft. But when she carries the ash bowls, no one questions her. When she speaks, just a word or two people listen. One evening, she adds a new step to the water testing ritual. She lowers a carved bone charm into the bowl before tasting. You ask her why. She shrugs, just in case it listens. It's half science, half prayer. And in your world, that's close enough. What began as chaos has become design, and what was once design is beginning to look like civilization. In the distant future, someone will dig into this cave. They'll see the stone gutters, the soot-packed walls, the bones stacked carefully away from food, the fire pit with its layered layers of ash, redug and rebuilt with obsessive precision. And they'll realize something. These people weren't just surviving a disaster, they were planning for the next one. This is how you rebuild from fear, not by waiting, but by changing everything around you. One stone, one rule, one ritual at a time. Subscribe if you haven't already. Because the storms may fade, but something worse is coming. Not from above, but from within the earth. The sky clears for 9 days, the longest stretch since the first burning rain. The tribe loosens slightly. People laugh more. The children play again, though, never far from the cave mouth. You begin sleeping without the ash wraps around your arms, but the ash keeper doesn't rest. Each morning she walks the perimeter. She sniffs the air, grinds, leaves between her fingers, tastes small samples of stream water. Every day, she adds another symbol to the cave wallamark, only she seems to understand. And then, on the 10th day, she stops everything. "We go deeper," she says. No one moves. It's not over. Disaster survivors often become paranoid. But in early human history, that wasn't a flaw, it was a survival trait. People who assumed danger could return were more likely to prepare. And in environments shaped by volcanic activity, this wasn't superstition, it was realism. One eruption could be followed by aftershocks, toxic gases, water contamination, or more eruptions. That instinct to dig deeper, move inland, or descend further was built into us. And that instinct may have birthed one of humanity's most unexpected tools. The underground chamber. You help carry torches. The lower chamber hasn't been visited in moons. Some say it was sealed on purpose, too damp, too tight, too haunted by old memories. But now, with ash running low and the forest unreliable, the ash keeper believes it's time to open it. The air grows heavy as you descend. It smells of wet stone and time. The torchlight dances on cave walls painted not with soot but scratches. Claw marks? Symbols? It's hard to tell. You reach a space just large enough to stand in. The ceiling curves low. Water drips somewhere in the dark. The ash keeper kneels. She places a bowl. She waits. In ancient caves around the world, archaeologists have discovered what appear to be ritual chambers deep below the main living spaces. These weren't random alcoves. They were intentionally used, but for what? In Lascaux Cave in France, the deepest chamber far from the main gallery features paintings of strange creatures and twisted symbols unlike anything near the entrance. In El Castillo Cave in Spain, hand stencils and dots appear at depths where no light could naturally reach. Why would prehistoric people descend into total darkness? Some say for vision quests. Some say for death rites. But one theory holds new relevance now. They went below when the air above became poison. The ashkeeper lights 3 small fires. One by the drip, one near the wall, one beneath the bowl. The flames burn slowless smoke, more heat. You taste the air. It's cooler, thicker. It doesn't sting. And then the water begins to flow. From cracks in the ceiling, it drips into the bowl. Not from rainwater above, but from filtered rock far below. She dips her hand in, drinks, waits, then nods. The cave has given us new breath. What you're witnessing is early geological filtration, and it's real. Water that seeps through layers of limestone, sandstone, or volcanic ash becomes naturally purified. It neutralizes acidity, gains minerals, loses toxins. Some of the oldest drinkable water in the world comes not from rivers or lakes, but from ancient underground aquifers formed during glacial and volcanic periods. Your ancestors wouldn't have known the chemistry, but they knew the result. And some tribes may have been saved entirely by what lay beneath their feet. The ashkeeper returns to the upper chamber. She draws a new symbol on the cave wall, a downward arrow through a spiral tipped with flame. No one asks what it means, but that night they start calling the lower chamber something new, the Mother's Mouth. With this new source, the tribe changes again. Water collection shifts underground. The sick are moved closer to the rock beds, where the air feels denser, and the sound of dripping calms the coughing. Children are taught a new ritual. Before sleep, touch the wall of the mother's mouth, and leave a breath just unto pay the cave back. It's not just about water anymore, it's relationship. And from that relationship comes early worship. In many ancient traditions, caves were seen as portals to the spirit world, to the womb of the earth, to the gods of rain and fire. And in regions touched by environmental catastrophe, underground chambers became more than shelters. They were sacred zones, places where the earth still cared. Or at least, where it didn't hurt you. You begin noticing something strange. Those who spend more time in the lower chamber speak less. They act calmer, slower. They make fewer mistakes during rituals. Your sister begins sleeping there. She wakes up stronger, her cough fading, but she starts saying odd things about voices in the stone, about dreams of water running backward, about hearing thunder in her chest when she touches the wall. You don't know whether to be afraid or relieved. The Ashkeeper only smiles. The cave is learning us. Maybe she's right. Maybe you've given the cave enough of your breath, enough of your fear, that now it remembers you. Or maybe it's just quiet down there. And in a world where the sky tried to kill you, quiet feels like a god. What lies underground isn't just stone, it's memory. And that's what we're excavating in every part of this story, how early humans carved safety from silence and found answers not in the heavens, but in the hidden places beneath their feet. Subscribe to keep exploring, because while the sky may have calmed, the earth has just begun to stir. The rains haven't returned in weeks. The sky is strange now, neither angry nor kind, just empty. Gray during the day, pale at night. The sun rises without heat. The moon feels distant, like it's watching something unfold that it's not allowed to interfere with. Your tribe keeps to its patterns. Ash lines the floors. The mother's mouth flows steadily. The children recite the warnings like lullabies. Don't drink the puddle. Don't chase the birds. If the sky turns yellow, run. You hear them whisper it in their sleep. None of them were alive before the rain. To them, this isn't adaptation, it's reality. This is how tradition forms. First comes trauma, then comes memory, then comes structure. Over time, the why of a rule is forgotten, but the rule remains. And when a generation is raised inside that system, it becomes something deeper. It becomes truth. In your tribe, no one touches the water above ground anymore, not even to test it. When a deer is found drinking from the upper stream, it's killed not for meat, but because it's considered tainted. The body is burned, the ashes scattered far from the cave. No one discusses it. No one questions it. It's not about food anymore. It's about purity. Archaeological layers show this shift in ancient communities, a move from flexible response to rigid custom. In the early layers, you find experimentation. Different tools, fire placements, food sources. But in later layers, especially post-disaster, you find repetition. Uniform burial styles, standardized tools, codified behaviors. In some areas, this rigidity helped. It created order, stability, culture. But in others, it became a trap. The Ashkeeper watches over the rituals now like a hawk. She corrects anyone who hangs the moss too early. She adjusts the soot lines if they drift too far left. She carries a hollowed gourd filled with crushed stone and ash and sprinkles it in a pattern before each meal. You ask her once what would happen if you didn't do these things. She doesn't answer with fear. She answers with certainty. Then it will come back. One night, a child drops a carved charm into the water bowl in the lower chamber. No one is hurt. The bowl is cleaned. The child is scolded. But the Ashkeeper insists the bowl be smashed, replaced. The child made to sleep outside the inner circle, closer to the entry tunnel. You try to protest, but she turns to you and says, "It's not punishment. It's protection." When does wisdom become control? When does adaptation harden into dogma? In certain ancient societies, post-catastrophe rituals evolved into ritual lawsome of the earliest roots of taboo. Anthropologists studying Pacific Island cultures observed how natural disasters, floods, volcanoes, poisonous algae blooms led to long-standing taboos about certain behaviors. Don't fish during certain moons. Don't eat animals from specific shores. Don't enter caves where ash still lingers. These began as survival strategies, but over time, they became sacred, rules enforced with ceremony, even punishment. Some say that without these systems, those societies wouldn't have endured. Others argue they trapped people into fear-based stagnation. You begin to see both sides now. You've lived long enough to remember before the ash when you still question things, still asked why. Now, even you speak in patterns. Even you walk the floor in measured steps, avoiding the cracks. Even you whisper a short breath into the mother's mouth each morning, whether you believe it listens or not. You don't want to risk being the one who forgets the rule. Not after what happened. Not when everything is finally calm. But calm isn't peace. It's waiting. And you feel it now beneath the rituals, beneath the ash-lined comfort that something is building again. Not in the sky, but in the earth. The air has grown warmer. The stone sometimes trembles faintly beneath your back at night. You feel it not just with your body, but your memory. This is what it felt like before the first rain. In the deepest layers of ash deposits across prehistoric Europe and Asia, geologists have found something disturbing. A double layer. The first, from initial eruptions and rainfall. The second, thinner, but hotter, with higher sulfur content, laid down years later. Proof that the Earth didn't strike once. It struck again. Just when the survivors had begun to believe it was over, your sister wakes with blood at her nose. The Ashkeeper claims it's the moss, the soot, the dry air from below. But you don't believe her. You touch the cave wall and feel it pulse, just once. A twitch, like the earth inhaling. If you've made it this far, you're witnessing what most of history misses, the slow, psychological evolution of survival into culture, and culture into belief. But what happens when the rules we made to protect ourselves begin to blind us to the next threat? Subscribe if you haven't already, because what's coming next can't be stopped by ash. The shaking returns in the middle of the night. It's not violent, just a hum. A brief, breathless vibration that moves through the stone floor like a warning whispered by a sleeping giant. You wake first, then others. No one speaks. The cave feels tight, too tight like the air forgot how to move. You press your palm to the wall. It's warm, not hot, but warmer than stone should ever be. You bring it to the Ashkeeper. She listens, frowns, then walks the full length of the chamber in silence. She drags her fingers along the soot lines, checks the water bowl in the mother's mouth, sniffs the air. The cave is purging, she says finally. It remembers the poison. This is normal. But you know it's not. Not anymore. For the first time in weeks, you begin to doubt her. She taught the tribe to survive. She read the signs. She built the systems. But all of those things, every one of them, were made for what came from above. Now, the threat is below, and none of her rituals account for that. In early human history, environmental threats didn't always come from the sky. They came from fault lines, volcanic vents, gas releases, earthquakes, and sometimes the most dangerous part wasn't the initial explosion or tremor, it was the false calm that followed. The earth has a rhythm, and ancient humans, though they couldn't measure it, felt it. That's why many cultures developed rituals not just for rain or fire, but for stone. In parts of Indonesia, mountain-dwelling tribes developed songs that mimicked ground tremors passed down for generations, encoding patterns of seismic activity through oral tradition. In the Andes, certain temples were built with rock stacks that mimicked tectonic fractures not by accident, but as recognition. The earth can split here. Your tribe has no such tradition. Not yet. The next morning, the stream at the mouth of the cave dries up. The rock wall is dry. The moss above it curls and browns. You go deeper. The mother's mouth still drips, but slower. The water tastes different, now bitter, like metal and smoke. You spit it out. Your sister coughs again, harder. The ashkeeper says nothing, but she burns her charm that night. Fear returns to the tribunal, the kind that makes people scream, but the kind that makes them quiet. The kind that comes before something happens. No one sleeps near the walls now. The children huddle at the center of the cave, even when the fire grows too hot. The rituals continue, but they feel hollow, like repeating an incantation to a god who has already walked away. Disaster survivors call this pre-traumatic tensiona, sense that the rules no longer apply, but no one knows what else to do. In the archaeological record, you can find this tension in strange places. Sudden migration of communities away from water, rich zones, buried tools that were never used, abandoned half-constructed shelters. Often near fault lines, these aren't signs of destruction. They're signs of doubt, of people no longer trusting the very systems they once believed would protect them. You begin questioning the drawings on the cave wall. Some of them depict hands, some depict storms. But one symbol repeated more than others shows a spiral broken at the edge. You'd always assumed it meant sky poison. But now, staring at the new cracks in the floor, it looks like a fracture, like earth poison. You ask the fire teller about it. She stares for a long time before answering. The spiral was the first wound, she says. Not in the sky, in the stone. The tribe decides to send scouts not above, but outward. You're one of them. You're chosen because you still question, because you remember. You pack dried root, an ash stone charm, and a torch soaked in fat. You follow the old hunter's path down the cliffside and into the ravine. It's the first time you've left the cave in 40 nights. The air smells strange too still. The trees are green, but the birds are gone. And on the third hour, you find it. A crack. Not in the ground. In the rock face itself. A long, jagged, split, trailing steam. The earth is opening. You mark the path and return. You want to lie. You want to say the forest is fine, that the world is healing. But when you step into the cave and see your sister curled near the fire, blood on her lips, you know you can't. You speak. You describe the crack, the steam, the missing birds, the poisoned water. You say the rain was just the beginning, that the earth is shifting again, that the old rituals were made for one kind of danger. But now there's another. The ashkeeper doesn't interrupt. When you finish, the cave is silent. And then she speaks. Then we must learn a new language. And that's where we're heading, into the unknown beneath the ash, into the parts of Earth that ancient humans feared even more than the sky. If this story has kept you close, subscribe now. Because the second storm is coming, and this time, it's not just acid, it's fire. You wake to heat, not from the fire, not from the sun, from the stone itself. The floor is warm beneath your palms. The air thick with something sour and metallic. You don't speak. You just rise, walk past the sleeping bodies, and press your hand to the cave wall. It pulses, once, twice, then stops. The ashkeeper is already awake. She stands near the mouth of the cave, staring toward the horizon, where the clouds aren't gray anymore, but tinted red. She doesn't speak, but she doesn't need to. The earth is about to open. The others rise slowly, eyes half lidded with dread. The rituals still happen, ash lines drawn, charms hung, the mother's mouth blessed. But this time, they feel ceremonial, symbolic. Everyone knows they won't be enough. The fire teller calls a council, not just the ash keeper, not just the hunters, everyone. It's the first true gathering in moons, not to react, not to remember, but to decide. And you speak first. You describe the crack, the breath of heat, the silence in the forest, the way the earth feels not like it's waking up, but like it's about to speak. We built for the sky, you say, but the danger is beneath our feet now. There's no shouting, no protest. Even the ash keeper nods. Then we must leave the cave. Leaving a shelter is no small thing in ancient times. It's like burning a temple. It's leaving behind everything your memory says is safe. But it's also the most human decision of all, to walk forward into the unknown, rather than wait for the known to kill you. In the archaeological record, there are entire cave sonts heavily used, carefully structured, full of layers of human life, abruptly abandoned, not burned, not destroyed, just left. Tribes moved out all at once, sometimes en masse, often never returning, sometimes due to resource collapse, sometimes due to spiritual shifts. But in volcanic zones and acidified regions, the signs point to one cause more than any other. The earth got too loud to ignore. You spend the night packing, not things, not tools, not meat, knowledge. You draw the wall symbols into bark. You sketch the soot patterns onto hide. You grind the healing bark into pouches and mix the ash water into travel gourds. You take the lessons, because that's the only thing that's portable. Before dawn, your tribe gathers. Even the fire teller walks without a cane. The ash keeper steps last out of the cave. But before she does, she turns. She kneels, and she places her hands on the warm stone one final time. "We remember," she whispers. "We leave with memory." Then she rises and walks away. Behind you, the cave breathes again. Not a tremble, a rumble. And then, silence. Across the valley, the tribe moves in single file. North, where the high ground holds, where the rivers have not yet turned, where the birds still fly, where the stones speak softer. As you walk, you plant signs, ash-marked stones, symbols scratched into bark, spirals left at stream beds. You're not just surviving now, you're signaling. This way is safer. The cave is dead. The water here doesn't burn. And maybe that's how it all began. The earliest trails, the earliest maps, not drawn on parchment but on land, written in charcoal, scars, and memory. By dusk, the sky is gold. Not angry gold, clean. The children sleep early. The elders don't speak. But you feel something in your chest. Not hope, not fear. Something simpler, something ancient, continuance. If you followed the story this far, you now know something most don't. That our ancestors didn't just fight nature, they studied it, outwitted it, and passed down survival not through domination, but through story. And now, with one part left, we'll trace how this one journey, the acid rains, the fire beneath, the flight from the cave became the seed of something bigger, the origin of civilization itself. It's been 3 sun cycles since you left the cave. The earth hasn't cracked open yet, but you feel it behind you, swelling, tightening, waiting. You've climbed ridges, crossed dry stream beds, and found high ground where the wind doesn't carry poison. Each step feels lighter, but only because the weight is now on your memory. That cave, once your entire world, is fading behind you like a bad dream. But its lessons, those follow you, always. Your tribe moves differently now. There's no fixed shelter. Every stop is temporary, but every stop has ritual. The moss mats are hung. The ash is spread in rings. The water is tested 3 times. And always you sleep facing the wind. You build not for comfort, but for escape. Not for forever, but for tomorrow. Across the ancient world, mobility was power. Many anthropologists now believe it was precisely these kinds of climate shocks, volcanoes, droughts, acid rain, that forced early humans to leave caves, forests, and fertile valleys and spread. And in doing so, they carried more than tools or fire. They carried systems. They carried memory. They carried survival logic encoded into movement, routine, and story. That's why, wherever humans went from the highlands of Africa to the coasts of Asia, find similar signs. Ash layers in fire pits, charcoal circles on cave floors, water filtered through rock and moss, symbols of spirals, cracks, and falling skies, different tribes, different continents, but the same trauma, the same lesson. When the earth turns on you, the only safe place is the one you carry inside your mind. Your sister now leads the water checks. She no longer coughs, no longer stares into space. She speaks clearly, walks with a rhythm. She laughs a little. The others trust her now. Maybe because she was burned once. Maybe because she remembers the sound the rain made when it boiled the stream bed. She carries the old water bowl from the mother's mouth, sealed in clay. We don't use it anymore, she says, but we remember who it saved. That's the difference now. You no longer worship the cave. You no longer fear the rain. You no longer treat ash like magic, but you keep them close. You remember. That's what archaeologists rarely see, but it's always there, in the layers of soot and soil. Not just humans surviving, but humans carrying that survival forward, adapting, transmitting, encoding their trauma into signs, systems, and steps so future generations didn't need to feel the sting of the first rain or the burn of the poisoned stream. The first maps weren't drawn for trade. They were warnings. The first stories weren't fantasies. They were instructions. And maybe, just maybe, the reason we have cities today, the reason we built aqueducts and filters and storm drains, the reason we mastered weather patterns and gas sensors and volcano monitoring, is because of people like you. Someone somewhere once stood beneath a yellow sky with skin burning and lungs tight and heart pounding and decided, we don't stay here. We don't die here. We learn from this. You pass a ridge before dusk. The horizon opens wide, and you see another trail, stones laid in a triangle, charcoal bark strung between trees, and a fresh set of footprints. Not animal, human. Another tribe, another trail, another memory, still alive. You smile. You mark the ridge with your symbol. Then you walk forward. This is how civilization began. Not with cities or language, but with survivors who turned pain into pattern and patterns into story. And the next time the sky turned against them, they were ready. If you made it to the end, thank you. You've just walked through the quiet origins of human survival. If you want more forgotten stories from deep prehistory, subscribe now. Because next time, we won't face rain or fire. We'll face each other.